I'm standing here today in Warren Lawrence Park, a 90-acre plot of land located in the Westridge neighborhood of Chicago, Illinois. In its current state, the park consists of many amenities for the surrounding community, including basketball courts, horseshoe, built-in chessboards, a seasonal ice rink, tennis courts, and a field house, among other features. What have we, as a community, done to deserve such an open parcel of land in the heart of one of the largest cities in America? Come with me as we look into its history. The history of Warren Park begins in June 1911. The Edgewater Golf Club has just decided to expand with a new 18-hole course at Ridge and Pratt, on the acres of land where Warren Park resides today. A clubhouse was added between 1912 to 1914. Then, for around 50 years, the club maintained a status quo of steady tee-offs and elitism without much threat to its continued existence. During this period, president of the org, Dennis E. Sullivan, once said, "The club and its property will not be sold. Real estate agents are hereby warned to keep off." However, this north side golfing paradise would not last forever. In the first half of the 1900s, as the golf club continues to attract golfing elites, housing developments start to pop up all around the club's land. As land becomes ever more limited in the area, developers started making bids to the club, hoping to transform the land into something with greater economic potential than undeveloped green grass and open air. In 1953, an unnamed firm offered $900,000, but the 300 club members rejected it. In 1964, another corporation offered $800,000 and some land in Niles. The membership rejected it. 1 year later, in 1965, the developers relevant to our story made an offer that membership could not refuse. Kenneth Tucker and Roy Gottlieb from the aptly named Ken Roy Realtors, in partnership with Jupiter Corporation, offer $7.6 million for the land, which is $72.5 million in today's dollars. They want to turn it into a mall and apartments. But President Thomas Webb Sexton and the majority of the club's 300 members do not care. The deal is approved, 205 to 73. Given the large amount of money offered, Sexton and friends gave the developers essentially until November 1st, 1967 to come up with the funds. Until then, Roy and Ken of Ken Roy will start planning the exact details of what they want to do with the land. "Surely," they said, "no one will stand in our way now." Except, there were people ready to stand in their way. Immediately after the sale was set, local organizations began sharing their concerns for the projects, mainly focusing on how a new development would bring overcrowding and traffic congestion to the area. These advocacy groups included the Northtown Community Council and Rogers Park Community Council, two groups that seemed destined to fight this battle. The Northtown Community Council was the first of the two groups to form, organizing their first meetings back in July 1963. Being described as a West Rogers Park conservation group by the Chicago Tribune, the council was mainly formed for the purpose of maintaining the level of community they enjoyed at the time. Their first action was sending out questionnaires to neighbors, searching for a problem to solve. Luckily, I guess, the question of the golf club's land arose only 2 years later and became a leading issue for the councils to address. The Rogers Park Community Council was founded earlier in 1952 as a response to the startling amount of lakefront developments they saw replacing public access to the lakefront. This organization is actually still around today as Northside Community Resources, but back in 1965, they were naturally not huge fans of the Ken Roy Mall idea. Collectively, these two councils formed the Allied Northside Community Organization, or ANSCO for short. While Ken Roy and Jupiter attempt to get the funds and full plan behind their development of the 90 acres on Northside, ANSCO is sure to become an active pain in the rear for them. On September 2nd, 1965, just days after the golf club purchase deal was approved by club membership, Alderman Jack Sperling of the 50th Ward introduces a resolution asking the city council to urge the Chicago Park District to acquire the lot of land to use as a park. As the land was in his district, it makes sense Jack is getting involved early on. He thinks the site would suit best as a public recreation area maintaining large areas of open space and parks. Well, I hope it works out for him. 3 days later, Paul Wagoda, alderman of the 49th Ward, joined Sperling in support of the proposal. The land itself is in Sperling's ward, but Wagoda's proximity to the land makes him a strong ally. Giving his thoughts on the resolution, Paul says, "I am terribly disappointed that Edgewater members saw fit to sell the club." Well, they did see it fit, Paul, but I'm glad you're on our side anyways. Well, while Jack and Paul try to whip up support in the city council, let's take a look at what Ansco is up to. As a matter of fact, hold up, I'm sorry. We seem to skip over who is leading the Northtown Community Council. I'm sure it can't be anyone that important to the story of Warren Lawrence Park. Now, who could it be? In October 1965, Northtown and Routers Park councils started to organize a study on the benefits of a city purchase of the land. Lawrence Warren says that it will take a few months for the study to be complete, as his group doesn't want to make any recommendations until contacting all of the impacted stakeholders in the area. Joseph Fontana, executive director of the Routers Park Community Council, agrees. By February 1966, Ansco becomes formally established and has a solid plan in mind. The land should be used for a new junior college location, with the rest of the surrounding land retaining its natural environment. Meeting with Dean Oscar Chabot, executive director of the Chicago Junior Colleges, the dean shares their passion behind the proposed site becoming a college campus, stating that, quote, "It is the only clear land in the area and, quote, the city should construct the junior college without first taking the time and expense to tear down old buildings," something they would have to do if they built the college elsewhere. So naturally, in November, Dean Chabot decides to go forward with a plan to build a new campus in Uptown. Despite the land in Uptown being 25 acres less than what is deemed necessary for their planned campus, Dean Chabot pushes for this new lesser site, saying it is extremely desirable due to the cost of land being low. Thanks for nothing, Oscar. What will Lawrence and his friends do now? It is now June 1967, around 2 years since the land deal was approved by club membership, and just months away from the November 1st deadline for Kinroy to provide the millions necessary to finalize the deal. Time is starting to run out, and Ansco needs to fight back. And Ansco does, threatening legal action if necessary to stop the sale, and sharing their plans to hire professional community planners to help illustrate the negative effects Kinroy's development would have as opposed to Ansco's hopes. To apply even more pressure on the developers, Ansco organizes a debate to be held in July between Ansco's leaders, like Lawrence, and Kenneth and Roy. Finally, Warren and his crew will be able to confront Kinroy firsthand in front of an audience. But of course, the developers didn't show up. In their place, they sent a letter and a scale model of the project, declining the invitation to debate. Well, whatever, Roy and Ken. We can take this opportunity to go over the preliminary plans you two shared. What exactly are you hoping to develop on this land anyways? While Roy and Ken didn't show up to the debate, Lawrence and his allies decide to share their findings on the development to their audience of over 200 spectators. In Roy and Ken's meetings with the Chicago Planning Commission, they shared they expect to build 4,000 apartments on the land with an average of 2.68 people per unit. Lawrence rejects this, estimating that based on the number of 2 to 3 bedroom apartments Kinroy planned to build, the number would be closer to 3.5 individuals per apartment, translating to a total of 14,000 residents in the complex. Alongside apartments, Kinroy hoped to develop a massive shopping center consisting of at least one large department store and around 50 to 60 smaller stores. With all these stores, local residents are rightly concerned with how all of these new people would be able to get around the area given the state of current public transportation and driving infrastructure. Alan Garber, a member of the Routers Park Community Council, shares the developers stated previously that traffic congestion wouldn't be an issue for the area, as shoppers and new residents will utilize the public transportation that's already offered. To this statement, the 200 people in attendance laughed, as the only public transportation at the time that connected to the area was a single bus line. And obviously, one bus line would not be enough. The debate was obviously a bust, but at least more awareness around the sale was shared. Thanks for nothing, Ken Roy. But all hope is not lost. In August 1967, 3 months before the sale, a powerful new ally joins Ansco's cause. On August 3rd, 1967, Mayor Richard Daley gets involved and meets with James Barry, chairman for Ansco. As Ansco has always wanted the city to purchase the land since forming over 2 years ago, this meeting could be very beneficial for the cause. And it was. Following the meeting, Barry reports that the delegation was encouraged by the mayor's position in the controversy, and Daley assured Barry that all proposals for the 90-so-acre plot of land are being considered by the city, and no hasty decision would be made. Frankly, it does not seem that Alderman Wagoda and Sterling have been too successful in getting the city to purchase the land all on their own, so it is good to have the mayor's interest. Hopefully some movement can be made now before the deadline. Oh no, we're too late! It's deadline day! All Kinroy have to do now is provide the funds, and the land is theirs. This is awful. A tragedy. How is this even an environmental success story? Did I even understand the assignment? How is this possibly going to turn out good? Wait a minute. Did you see that? The deadline just moved a year later. How did that happen? Well, it seems like the developers couldn't turn the money in on time, but that is not the reason. Days before the deadline, our ally, Alderman Wagoda of the 49th Ward, introduced a resolution that passes down zoning the land from R4 classification to R2, effectively disrupting the developer's plan to build high-rises and making the purchase price uneconomical for single-family housing. The resolution passed on November 1st. While undercutting the developer's plans, this action also activated a clause in Kinroy's contract with Edgewater Golf Club. This clause made it so that the developers had 1 extra year to come up with the money necessary to purchase the club. Interesting move, Paul. Mainly due to the zoning change, Jupiter Corporation dropped out of the deal. It was all Kinroy now. Moreover, president of the Jupiter Corporation said, if the property is rezoned, we would not be interested in building on it, and the introduction of the zoning change is enough to make us pull out. He also shared that, quote, the other reason we are leaving is because the residents in the area don't want the apartments and shopping center. Well, that makes sense. I'm sure those are the only reasons they are dropping out now. Anyways, not to worry. Ken and Roy still feel confident about it. 1 more year can't be that bad. Plus, this time maybe they will actually have enough money to complete the purchase. Even if Alderman Wagoda didn't intend it, that extension gave them a second chance to get the money necessary to complete the deal. And man, that year really did work out for them. 1 year later, on October 30th, 1968, old Thomas Webb Sexton of the golf club estimated that each of the club's members will receive around $22,500, or in 2023 dollars, $195,000 when the purchase is complete. And on November 1st, 1968, the deal was complete. On November 3rd, the Ansco camp is in despair, as the city seems content with the finalized sale. Hyman Goldberg, executive secretary of Ansco, shares her feelings with the simple, "I'm numb," adding that, quote, "I had hoped to the end we could save the land, but I'm going to keep hoping. They haven't dug the first hole yet." Our friend Laurence, too, he remains vigilant, stating that we'll fight down to the last acre. As the year comes to an end, the cause seems lost, and we move into 1969. In January, Kenneth and Roy reveal their full development plans to the City Council Committee on Buildings and Zoning. They request a rezoning of the land so they can build a total of 12 apartment buildings that vary in size from 20 to 40 stories tall. They also want to build 134 clustered single-family town units, as well as a large shopping center with 2 large stores, smaller outlets, and office spaces. In total, the two wish to build around 3,870 apartments and townhouses, covering around 60 acres of the 90-acre plot of land. They say they will dedicate the remaining 30 acres for recreational uses, with 13 of the 30 being for a park, to be added in the future, and a school. All in all, Ken and Roy want to build an Edgewater village that would radically transform the golf club's land into a city itself. John Cordwell, architect of the Edgewater village, said it would take years to complete. 6 optimistically to 10 pessimistically years. One aspect Cordwell also shared is that he wants to retain the line of tall trees along Pratt Avenue. Great. Thanks, Cordwell. At least we'll keep the trees. Well, what is there to be done now? And really, what has the city done to help the cause? It's obvious that Warren and everyone at Ansco has been working hard to keep the park. But what has the city been up to? Oh, well, you know what? I've just heard that Mayor Daley has been in touch with someone he thinks it could help. Who could it be? In early 1969, as the development plans are being finalized and the land is successfully rezoned to a planned development site, Mayor Daley has been communicating with Governor Richard B. Ogilvie, asking for state intervention in the land issue. Nice sombrero, Governor. Warren and the Ansco team have seemingly got Mayor Daley onto their side, and with the state's help, the land war might not be over yet. The plan is for the state legislature to pass a bill that would appropriate state money towards purchasing the land back from Kinroy to convert it to a state park. At the time, creating a state park in Chicago was a fairly radical idea, as the only state park in the city at the time was the Stephen A. Douglas Monument near 35th Street and Lake Park Ave. Convincing state legislators to jump on board with this proposal could prove to be a bit difficult. But luckily, Governor Ogilvie found his champions in Representative Edward J. Copeland and Senate Majority Leader Russell Arrington. As the land was located in Copeland's district, Copeland would introduce it in the House and Senator Arrington would carry it through the Senate. Representative Copeland's main argument is that the state's purchase of the land is the last resort to meet the desperate need for open space in the Chicago area. I also predict that support for this bill came from how much environmentalism was growing going into the 1970s. In June 1969, Representative Copeland's bill passed through the House 123-5, and then through the Senate 30-4, which was really just barely over a majority of the 57-member Senate at the time. The bill allocates $950,000 from the state's budget towards purchasing the land, planning on the remaining funds necessary to come from federal open space grants. In September, Governor Ogilvie signs the bill. Now, all they have to do is convince the developers to sell the land back to the state. Representative Copeland says if negotiations fail, the state does have the right to condemn the property, but surely that won't happen. Even though the bill was signed in September, by November 1969, nothing much was happening, and Mayor Daley began to worry. On November 5th, he wrote a letter to the governor. Kinroy have just applied for a building permit last week, and the governor hasn't made any moves since signing the bill. It's time to start the negotiations before construction breaks ground. A day after the letter, Kinroy files a legal complaint against Building Commissioner Joseph F. Fitzgerald for refusing to process their first permit for a $4.4 million apartment structure on the land. Oh, and they also want $1 million in damages from the city because of the delay. Okay, Kinroy. Another month goes by, and the governor is still silent. On December 8th, Circuit Court Judge Edward J. Egan orders the city of Chicago to issue the building permit within 72 hours. On December 10th, 48 hours later, City Corporation Counsel Raymond F. Simon says he will file a motion in Circuit Court asking Judge Egan to vacate his order that the building permit must be issued. Simon says this is just one part of the city's strategy to delay construction until the state has the funds necessary to buy the land, and he is doing this on Mayor Daley's orders. A proper soldier, I'd say. On December 19th, 9 days later, Governor Ogilvie finally shares his full plan for the land in a press conference. He says his staff had been working tirelessly for months to line up the cash necessary to buy the land from the developers. His team has talked to the U.S. Housing and Urban Development Secretary and the Department of Interior Secretary about funding from the federal level, and their conversations gave him enough confidence to say that funds from these agencies and other sources are now in sight for the purchase. He also mentions that his team had conversations with the White House, all with the view of saving this precious tract of open land for the public. The governor also mentions that as the Chicago City Council rezoned the land from its original residential zoning, the developer's asking price had shifted from $7.8 million to $35 million. The The governor blames City Council for this and states the state will make an offer closer to $8 million, the original asking price. Unfortunately, the City Council tried to right their wrongs, but their actions proved fruitless. 3 days before the governor's speech, the City Council voted 44-0 to repeal the Planned Development Zoning Ordinance passed in March. But it turns out their vote was illegal because a public hearing on zoning charges must first be held before a vote is taken. They didn't do that, so the property remained a planned development zone. Sorry, Governor. Back to the governor's new plan, the state offers the $8 million developers asked for in the first place. Attorney Haskins describes the offer as unacceptable. Whatever. The developers then offer 6 various proposals for the land, with the best offer involving selling 60 acres of the land, but not all of it. Negotiations ultimately break down in January, and in February 1970, the state files a condemnation lawsuit against the land. You know, I remember Rep. Copeland saying they have that right. Ultimately, a compromise is reached between Kinroy and the state on June 17, 1970. Kinroy will sell 2/3 of the property, which is 59.3 acres, to the state for the $8 million to be finally converted to a state park. The remaining acres of the property will be kept by Kinroy and their allies, as they still hope to build a high-rise apartment complex. So great, 2/3 of the property is saved. But they are still going to try to develop on this land. We can't let that happen. Let's get Warren and see what we can do about it. But unfortunately, Laurence Warren did not live to see his project complete. On April 20th, 1970, Laurence C. Warren died from rheumatic heart disease. He was 47 years old. Alongside being the founder and president of the Northtown Community Council, he was also a lawyer and formerly served as a commander in the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary. In my research, I also discovered that Laurence died just a little under a month after his mother, Hannah, passed away. One could say he died of a broken heart. While Laurence played such a pivotal role in the fight, he never got to experience the park he advocated so heavily for. His loss was felt heavily by his activist colleagues, however, as they vowed to continue fighting to make the entire property a park. In the wake of Lawrence's death, Theodore Berland, a chairman of ANSCO, vowed that they are, quote, still going to try and get the rest of it through every means possible. He also asked the state to name the park after Laurence, given his dedication to the project. The state will honor his wishes. On September 11th, 1971, Governor Ogilvie signs legislation renaming Edgewater Golf Club to Laurence C. Warren State Park. Nevertheless, the developers still hope to build an apartment building with the remaining land. On July 2nd, 1971, the developers' plans to continue construction become a lot more clear. Apparently, Kinroy had a contract with a Winston Development Company that mandated 20 acres of the land they acquire must be given to Winston for their development wishes. I assume this agreement was established early on when Kinroy bought the land in the first place. So, no matter the 60 acres the state has acquired, Winston plans to go ahead with constructing 2,400 housing units on the 30-acre land they have now. Speeding into September 1972, history seems to instantly repeat itself as the Chicago Park District Board of Commissioners authorizes a condemnation suit to acquire the land. The Park District offers $6 million for the land. Winston raises their asking price to $12 million. Naturally. It ends up taking almost 2 full years for the entire process to be completed. On August 2nd, 1974, the Chicago Public Building Commission votes unanimously to buy the 35 acres on behalf of the Chicago Park District for $10.3 million. The land is finally under joint state and city control. ANSCO have won. In fact, before the final 35 were purchased, the state had actually already leased the 60 acres of their state park to the Park District on a $1 a year contract. By the time of the final sale, the state park had already been handed over to Park District control. It was time to finally make Warren Park a part of the Chicago Park District. when Patrick L. O'Malley, president of the park district, was asked about his plans for the park, he shared that he wanted to put the golf course back into playable shape and add a tennis court and swimming pools. But first, he said, the first thing we are going to do now is mow the grass. Finally, victory achieved. I'm thankful for all the allies we had along the way. Laurence and Ansco on the ground, Governor Ogilvy and Rep. Copeland from up high, and of course, Mayor Daley and our alderman allies. Wait, Paul, what is that? Oh my, $50,000, Paul. What? That's almost $410,000 in 2023 dollars. That's almost $500,000. Where did you get that from? You did what? So, you might remember very early on about the initial deadline being pushed back a year due to the zoning change filed by Alderman Wagoda. Well, it was suspicious at the time, but it's clear to us now. Wagoda was bribed. Paul was bribed. Just when we thought we had won with everyone on our side, Paul had to go mess it all up. Prior to his successful delay of the purchase deadline, attorney Robert Haskins for the developers gave Wagoda an envelope with $50,000 on April 8, 1969. Roy later admitted to generating the money and giving it to Haskins to give to Wagoda. Wagoda was ultimately indicted 5 years later on April 5, 1974. Months before the park was under complete control of the city. And ironically, he wasn't charged on bribery charges, no. He was charged on, of course, tax evasion. I expected better out of you, Paul. No matter Paul's mischievous dealings, Warren Park made it out alive and exists today, over 50 years past the war surrounding its conception. And I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon. I believe we take parks like Warren Park for granted. As trash continues to pile up, the infrastructure of the park's many amenities continue to crumble, and the grounds continue to be unkept. We must remember the years of advocacy work that got us this precious plot of land. We should remember Lawrence Warren, the park advocate who never got to see the completion of his work. And we should remember Ansco and its plethora of members I couldn't even begin to list. But in the end, if you take anything away from this video, it's that you should go to your local park and roll down a hill, because that is what advocates like Lawrence Warren would want you to do. Go out into the local nature of your urban community and take advantage of it however you can.